business, sustain a small business, and grow a small business.
All right, Hunter, I think we might have lost you there. So we'll go ahead and send it over to Karen Moldovan, our Director of Policy, for the to introduce Steve White.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. I know everyone has a ton going on and we just want to jump right in. Just so everybody knows, the U.S. Small Business Administration, or SBA, was created in 1953, and it's an independent agency of the federal government to aid, counsel, assist, and protect the interests of small business concerns. So the SBA recognizes that small businesses are a key component to economic recovery and strength. So we're just thrilled to have Steve with us here today to really talk through what the SBA is doing right now. I know they are working in overdrive, and specifically to talk about emergency loans that are available to really assist our small businesses through this very tough time. So Steve White is a lead lender relations specialist for the Colorado District Office of the U.S. Small Business Administration, or SBA. He's been working for the SBA as a lender relations specialist in the Colorado District Office since 2013. Then he went over and did some of this work in Western North Carolina, and then came back to Colorado in 2017. His experience with the SBA, though, began in 1995. So I think we have a lot of expertise today, and we're just thrilled that he could join us, especially, like I said, at a time where it's really all hands on deck. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve. I think the way we're going to do this is he's going to talk just kind of a brief sort of overview about federal resources right now, emergency loans, how SBA is structuring their work, and then we'll turn it over to questions. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat box. Looks like we already have a few. So I'll kind of try to consolidate those. So I would urge folks to use the chat box. Be patient, because I'll get through it. I know some folks may be not able to chat in. So as Jordan mentioned, there is the raise your hand function. So if folks raise their hand, I'll keep an eye on that, and we'll try to get you unmuted so you can ask your question. But right now, we'll just go ahead and turn it over to Steve.
All right. Thank you, Karen, Jordan, Hunter. I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to speak to folks. Historically, the economic injury disaster loan declarations have been made when the Small Business Administration received a certification from a state governor that at least 5 small businesses had suffered substantial economic injury as a result of a physical disaster and could prove need of financial assistance that was not otherwise available on reasonable terms. Now, again, historically, this process was conducted county by county. However, due to the nature of the COVID-19 pandemic, the SBA has decided to make the disaster declaration statewide, and as you're probably well aware of, it is now nationwide. And by the way, you may have noticed that Colorado was one of the first states to receive that statewide declaration. That was due to a lot of work and a team effort by the governor's office, by our district office, and by the folks at the Colorado Small Business Development Center network. So a lot of people worked really hard to make sure that Coloradans were well represented, and as such, we stay ahead of the curve. So at any rate, that brings us to today. The SBA disaster website now includes, of course, every county of Colorado as an eligible disaster declared area. So all small businesses in the state of Colorado, certain small agricultural cooperatives, and small businesses engaged in aquaculture, and some private nonprofit, non-charity-based organizations who have been adversely impacted by the COVID-19 situation may be eligible for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. So that brings us to what is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program? Well, what it is this. If your small business has suffered substantial economic injury because of the disaster, you may be eligible for this program. We're going to define substantial economic injury as the inability of a business to meet its obligation as it works to mature and meet ordinary and necessary working capital operating expenses. The purpose of the economic injury disaster loan is to provide the necessary working capital to help small businesses survive until normal operations can resume. The assistance is available to small businesses that are determined to be unable to obtain credit elsewhere. And this determination is not met in the field. That is to say that our district office does not make this determination. Rather, the determination of whether or not you can obtain reasonable credit elsewhere on non-onerous terms, that will actually be made via the SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance during the application and underwriting process. Now, about the loan program itself, the economic injury disaster loan can provide up to a maximum of $2 million to help meet financial obligations and operating expenses which could have otherwise been met had the disaster not occurred in the first place. Now, the actual loan amount received by successful applicants will be based on the actual economic injury and the company's demonstrated financial needs as based upon the application. The maximum interest rate for this loan has been set at 3.75%, and it can be negotiated for a term of up to 30 years. So again, the cap on the amount is $2 million. The interest rate is as low as 3.75, and that's spread over 30 years. It's pretty good money considering the circumstance. Now, there are some minimum credit requirements. Applicants must have an acceptable credit history. There will be minimum credit scores. A reason to decline an application would be any delinquency to a federal government or federal government program. Some questions folks have been asking is what is the quote-unquote minimum credit score? Unfortunately, I don't have a number to throw out at you, and the reason why is, keep in mind, this loan program is being offered in Guam, American Samoa, all the 50 states, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, so every U.S. territory. And because of that, as you can imagine, there is a vast difference in economic performance through those large geographical areas. So because of that, the minimum credit score will be taken in totem with the business application. Another thing is taxes. It is imperative that small businesses are either current on all federal and state tax filing requirements, or you've got your workout agreements in place and you can document the same. Probably the bigger issue is the ability of the small business applicant to demonstrate capacity, which is the ability to repay the loan if granted. And then collateral. Collateral is required for economic injury disaster loans when the amount exceeds $25,000. So $25,000 or less, no collateral is required. If the amount is north of $25,000, which I feel like for most small businesses it will be, SBA is asking you to pledge whatever collateral is available. If you don't have collateral available, that's fine. Lack of collateral in and of itself is not sufficient reason to deny the economic injury disaster loan. But if you do have some available, the SBA will ask you to pledge it. And then probably the final large consideration will be affiliation, and this plays into a small business's ability to obtain credit elsewhere. And what I mean by that is typically businesses are owned by several entities, or if you're a typical entrepreneur, you don't have this one small business, you've got several. And so businesses end up being tied together. And what SBA is trying to do is make sure that these loans are going to legitimate small businesses. The SBA is not in business to fund large businesses, for example, like a Boeing Sikorsky or FedEx or someone like that. They want to make sure that we're lending to the folks who need to get the credit that we can help with now. The place to go to apply for the loan is disasterloan.sba.gov, or honestly, at this stage, if you want to Bing or Google or whatever, just put in SBA disaster loan, it will take you to the right site and you go from there. And we provide a handout that we can send to folks if they don't have it already that will sort of walk you through the process. Some of you may have noticed at this point that the our site, our initial hyperlink is down, and I would encourage patience as you work with us, and knowing that this is the first time in the history of the Small Business Administration we've made a disaster loan program available to 50 states simultaneously, along with all territories. And again, I would just remind you, historically, the Office of Disaster Assistance of the SBA was set up to help a few counties or a small regional area in the event of what we consider a disaster, right? A flood, a fire, an earthquake, a hurricane, and that sort of thing. So our systems weren't designed to handle this amount of traffic. So I would beg your patience as we walk through this. So that's really, I wanted to start off with that. And then Karen, if you'll just direct me to the questions, and I'll be glad to help whatever I can. If I don't know the answer, that's fine. I'll make sure and get that back to you as soon as possible, so you can send that to your audience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And the handout that Steve mentioned, we'll be sending that to everyone. You'll receive that as soon as we wrap up the webinar. So lots of questions already coming in, and I'm going to try to group them a little bit, but a couple questions in particular about the stimulus package that I know the Senate passed last night. I'm not sure where the House is today, but we should be seeing the stimulus package very soon. So a couple questions around some of the information that's coming out of the Senate stimulus package. How is that different than the emergency loans that are granted right now? So there's a specific question about tax credits within the federal stimulus package, and saying that businesses have to prove they took a 50% loss compared to the same quarter in years past. Is that a stipulation for the SBA emergency loans? Or that's something
Gotcha.
different?
So, right, no, great question. And as for right now, these programs are siloed. The economic injury disaster loan that we're looking at today is a separate program. It's a historical or legacy program that's been in the Office of Disaster Assistance quiver for quite some time. This new stimulus package that has passed the Senate, I would remind everyone, so we'll take you back to 8th grade civics. It's also going to have to get its finalization accompaniment from the House. It'll have to be signed into law, and then once it is signed into law, what will happen then is the process will be sent down to the affected agencies. Clearly, the Small Business Administration would be one of those agencies. Once that happens, we'll put our application touches on it. And Karen, Jordan Hunter, if it's okay with you, once we've got salient information and guidance that we can pass out about that, I'll just send that to you. And if you wish, we can have another call exactly like this, where I could probably do a lot better job answering those questions. Because honestly, at this point, it's still too new. We clearly haven't been able to finalize and that sort of thing. And if I were to make comment on it, it would be a disservice, honestly, to anyone on the phone. So I don't want to put out bad information that we've got to go back in and correct later. But just know that, yeah, it is coming down the line. Could it affect the economic injury disaster loan program? That is conceivable, but as of right now, this moment, and things are going to continue unfolding and changing, but right now it's a silent program, and so it doesn't have an effect at this instant.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful, and I'm sure we will take you up on that about doing a second webinar once we actually have the stimulus package. So here's a question I thought was really interesting. This question says, our business has all remote workers, so we don't have a physical office other than home offices based in Colorado, Missouri, and Kansas. Does that lack of a single physical office disqualify us?
No, not at all. And what I would ask the applicant to do is what you want to do in a situation like that, and it's a pretty common situation, so no worries there. Whichever state the business was first and or is mainly operating out of now, by way of, usually it's a declaration with your Secretary of State and that kind of thing. And this happens a lot where there's 3 or 4 or more entities or small businesses operating under an umbrella entity. I would encourage the umbrella entity to be the one who applies And so wherever that umbrella entity is formulated or incorporated out of, that's the state designation you're going to want to use. It's not a huge deal other than it may be a time sink, if you will. You wouldn't want to waste time going one method just to have to back down the path and restart. So definitely, I would encourage the umbrella organization to be the one who files and go from there.
Great, thank you. Another question from the chat box: can undocumented people who have an ITIN and not a social security number apply for the SBA disaster loan?
Absolutely, yeah. So basically, our interest here is that we get the available capital into the hands of a small business. They can continue at the rate they have been before the business, presumably maintain that throughout the situation, and then reopen after the disaster is over. So what they're going to need is a social security number or an applicable legal permanent resident number. Because for the economic injury disaster loan program, there's a sort of a dual stage application, if you will. The first is registration, and it's during that registration piece where they would put in whatever social or identification number that they have. Then the next piece is the actual application part, and that's where the business EIN would come into play.
Great, thank you. Do sole proprietors qualify? So what about somebody who has an LLC but no employees?
Absolutely. Regardless of your business formulation, sole prop, all the way through full-bodied C Corp corporation, limited liabilities, it doesn't matter. If your business, actually, if your business is a going concern as of the date of the disaster declaration, which for this one was 13 March, then you're eligible to apply, and I would encourage you to do that. And on that note, please, I would like for no one to self-exclude themselves and to think, well, for this reason or that, I may not be eligible. Absolutely not. Please go and apply and walk through the process. And I would hope that if you did get disqualified, it would be through the process and not through your own inertia, so to speak. Not that I want anyone to be disqualified, of course, but yeah, definitely sole props, full body corporations. The eligibility piece really is that we're concentrating on is that you're a small business or small going concern.
Great, thank you. Another question. So somebody chatted in that they actually already applied for their loan on Sunday and they received confirmation and now it's under review. What do they, what can they expect in terms of how long the process takes?
I don't know if that feedback's from me or not. Apologies. So yeah, so what they're going to want to do is go back to that site. And if you've been to that site, you may have seen it. There's three bubbles there. The far left bubble is for the eligibility by county, which we've all met now because of statewide. The middle bubble was the apply, and in the far right bubble was the status. And so what I would encourage you to do is every 24 to 48 hours, go back and check that status just so you can see where your loan is in the process, where it's at as far as disbursement and that sort of thing. And that'll also be your key pathway to maintaining continuity with your Office of Disaster Assistance loan officer and or underwriter too, if they've got further information and that sort of thing. Also, if you're a small business and you do apply and you are granted a loan amount of some kind, most likely what generally happens is that at some later point you're going to realize that you're going to need more, that what you applied for wasn't enough, or you suffered continuing losses and that kind of thing. So if you want to go back and have a loan modification to increase that amount, you can absolutely do that, and that would be the pathway to conduct that transaction.
Is there any sort of like typical time frame that you all are able to tell folks to expect, or is that not really possible right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, historically in a Katrina or Maria kind of situation, I can tell you what that was. However, since this is a first for all of us, It would be a disservice for me to even guess. I want to manage expectations and just remind everyone, you're not competing with other businesses. The application is based upon the application itself. And so when the disbursement happens, is basically as the process works. What I'm hoping, and this is fingers crossed and that sort of thing, was within a couple more weeks, we will have had enough applications that we should start being able to see some trends that would show denials and trends that would show acceptance, and what the turnaround time is for disbursement to take place after the loan has been accepted. So unfortunately right now, I don't even have a basis to give you an answer. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, I understand. Another question, will taking this loan affect credit scores, applying as well as receiving it of the applicant?
It could, potentially it could. It should not be, I believe that in the credit world they use the quote unquote hard and soft hits on your credit score. It is my understanding, and I could be wrong, but it is my understanding, so forgive me if I am, that this is quote unquote a soft hit, if any. Sort of situation. And again, there's no cost to apply. Oh, and there's no requisite. If you do apply and you are given the loan, you don't have to accept it. So businesses are free to register, to apply, to get their loan, and then once it's granted to them, they can sort of leave that on the shelf, if you will. If there's another program they'd rather seek, kind of situation, just know that it's there for them. So we've tried to be as flexible as we can. But having said that, whether or not this impacts your credit, it is conceivable that it would, but it's my understanding from the Office of Disaster folks that it's a soft hit. I hope I'm correct there.
Awesome, thank you. So can you talk a little bit about eligibility requirements in terms of how long a business has been in existence? So we have a question, what if a business is still growing and not showing a profit yet?
Gotcha. Yeah, so conceivably, as long as they can show that they were an ongoing concern the day of the declaration, which for us is 13 March, that's fine. They can show that a couple of different ways. When they registered with the Secretary of State, whatever date that is, when you set up your business depository accounts at a lender, you could use that date. Your taxes often show the date, or a date that's in your constitution or bylaws for an incorporation of the business. You can use that as well. So there's not, conceivably, there's not a minimum for having to have been in business. What's more important is that the business is able to demonstrate through its financials that it did suffer loss. The loss was due to COVID-19, and that without the COVID-19 interruption, it would have otherwise been able to meet its business operating expenses.
That makes sense. So another sort of aligned question around that, and this might be a little bit in the weeds about the application process, but I think it's a good question. Talking about how on the application, when you're asked to estimate losses on the first page, the question is around, real estate, inventory, machinery and equipment, leasehold improvements. So all those questions would make sense for like a flood or a hurricane or the type of disasters you typically are probably dealing with. But it doesn't ask about like loss in sales. So they said it's actually question number 15. So, folks haven't maybe had a physical loss. They may still have their building. It's just people can't come to it. So how is that captured?
Right, no, that's a great question. And that's going to be captured on the application. Forgive me if I can't remember what the page number is, but there's a place to show your operating income and the delta or difference between the COVID-19 and now, so to speak. So, but yeah, you'll definitely want to do that. Also, too, if you fill out the application and just like this, you feel like you weren't able to tell your story, that there's more to be added and that kind of thing, definitely add that in the upload document section. You can always do that at any point throughout the application system. And then that 800 number to the SBA Disaster Customer Service Center, you can call there, or it might even be better to have that written out and supply that via email along with your application number to make sure that is counted towards your application. So the point is, we want you to be able to tell your story and get that point across.
That makes sense. Thank you. So we've actually had a few of these questions, and I know we said we were going to do another webinar when the stimulus package is done, and we don't want to get too in the weeds in that because we don't have it yet. So we don't want to, put information out there. But folks are wondering about sort of concurrent processes and timelines around should we actually apply for this SBA economic disaster loan when there may be other loan opportunities in the stimulus package, and if we apply now for this loan, will it impact being able to apply for other loans that are approved through the stimulus package?
Gotcha. No, that's a great question. It's a fair question. And the way I would answer it is this, that historically, any disaster loan, and I'm speaking now only from the Small Business Administration side of things, but historically, when there's an Office of Disaster Assistance loan program, that program and its requirements are completely siloed from other SBA programs and requirements, meaning that the debt service coverage ratios and that sort of thing should not necessarily transfer over to the other program and should not prevent you from applying what you should otherwise be able to receive. And I will say that generally it doesn't, simply because of the cost of the terms. Whenever you have that long spread, 30 years, with that low interest rate, it usually doesn't affect what you're doing in another realm too much. I mean, could there be some effect? Sure, mathematically, but I think it would be small enough as to not be detrimental. Now, having said that, today and going forward, and with the coming stimulus package, that kind of thing, could there be some impact and that sort of thing? Yeah, absolutely, there could be. And again, I would just be remiss to comment on that at this stage because I just don't. I don't know.
Sure. Thank you. So there's a question referencing a recent Forbes article, and it says that payroll for employees as well as contractors can be counted as a business expense. So they just wanted to clarify, is that correct, or must they be employees to be counted as an expense?
Absolutely. So for the and I'm speaking now only again for the disaster assistance loan program. On this program, basically any business operating expense. So this will be atypical of a lot of the P&Ls and your balance sheets that you would put together. You're basically trying to show the losses that or expenses that you're incurred that you're not able to cover because of the losses from the COVID-19. So yeah, you can absolutely count those. Definitely, especially in the situation of a sole proprietor, what you're paying yourself in this instance would qualify as an acceptable expense.
So another question, if the loan is denied, is there an opportunity to appeal or reapply? What would be your advice in that situation?
Yes, so in the SBA world, our magic phrase is a request for reconsideration. Again, that's request for reconsideration. So what you do in the event that you apply and or deny for the economic injury disaster loan is you're going to want to contact that number that's been given you for your loan officer, and you're going to want to submit a request for reconsideration. And at that point, because what we're expecting, honestly, is for things to change as we go through this. Hopefully for the better, but regardless, like we've all seen the last couple of weeks, life gets a vote. So what we would do then is we would encourage the applicant who got denied to request reconsideration through the Office of Disaster Assistance, and then they will walk them through that process to make that happen. Probably what that'll look like is what it has in history, and that the loan officer will provide a list of what are called screen outs or considerations, and walk the applicant through providing that information.
Great, thank you. So we know in times like this, rumors can get started. It's hard to know what information is correct or not. So we did have a question that I think is interesting. A participant heard that you get $10,000 just for applying for the economic injury disaster loan, and that even if denied, you can still keep those initial funds. So that sounds a little bit too good to be true. So we were hoping you could talk through that.
That does sound very good. Unfortunately, that is at our current state of things, here on the 26th day of March, right about 2:30 Mountain Standard Time, 2020. That is not a policy that the Small Business Administration is authorized to make. And keeping in mind, the economic injury disaster loan, it is just that. It is a loan. It is not a non-recourse loan. This is a repayment loan. It's not a grant. And the idea is to not provide enough assistance that just simply keeps struggling business in trouble. The idea is to help what would otherwise have been a continuing healthy going concern to remain healthy and to be able to survive, mature, and reopen. So that's basically the idea and the structure behind the loan.
That makes sense. So a couple questions about the technology. It sounds like folks have been on it and the site has crashed, and then
Yes.
they lost some of the information, tried again today, but weren't able to see the downloadable sheets that they had to fill out and upload. And then questions around, if the site is revamped, is it going to lose their information? So I know, like you said, this is the first time you've ever had this loan open for all 50 states where the whole nation is declared an emergency. Disasters are aside at the moment. But what can you tell us about the technology and how folks can best get their application in, even if the site is kind of off and on right now?
Gotcha. Okay, so, and thanks for asking that, because this is a really good point for clarification. For those who have not yet been to the site and you haven't started, I would definitely direct them towards the worksheet that I sent out, and please go about it that way. And it's simply a method of downloading the applicable forms that need to be filled out and then uploading them and sending them either via a direct hyperlink or via email. Or there is the standard snail mail application where you put it in the envelope, lick the stamps, and send it that way. Now, for the folks who have applied, if they were given their application number and they were able to hit submit and it was complete, I would encourage them every 24 to 48 hours to go back to the site and check the status bubble to make sure that it's moving through the system. Now, that leaves the folks who applied and the system crashed kind of midway through the application kind of thing, or if they just don't feel like it. For those folks, what I would do is highly encourage them to call that 800 SBA disaster customer service number and find out. You should have a password that you'll be able to use to give to those folks, and they should be able to tell you where your application is in that instance. Now, to manage expectations, I've called this number a couple of times myself just to see what's happening and that sort of thing. The last time I was on there, the wait time was 52 minutes, 5-2, as in close to an hour. And so I apologize about that. So I would beg your patience, but I would reach out to that number because it's going to be the best place to go to find out about your individual application and what happened to it. Did it get lost? And that sort of thing. Because what you would not want to do is assume that the whole thing has gone away and then reapply, and now they've got crossing application numbers for the same business, because it could possibly appear like shotgunning, and we don't want that for the applicant. So that's probably going to be the best step to take in that instance. Now, having said that, I would encourage everyone to, if you can, I would highly encourage you to make your applications or to call the 800 number after 7 p.m. and before 7 a.m. Those seem to be the off-peak hours, and folks are having typically more success during that time than the other time. However, having said that, I think I and a lot of my counterparts throughout the 50 states, American territories, are probably saying that same thing. So sometimes those hours might switch. Yeah. So there we go.
There's a note in here from somebody who started their application just telling folks, it's always good practice to save as you go. You might want to, if you start the form, try to save it, copy paste whatever to a Word doc or whatever format you use to work on, and save as you go. And I think that's always good advice.
Absolutely.
So a couple of questions in here about terms for loan forgiveness. So again, I just want to make sure folks know that, what we're talking about is specifically the SBA emergency disaster loans. And I think sometimes it can get a little confused with other loans. but is loan forgiveness an option if employees are retained for a certain amount of time after receiving funding? So kind of the second follow-up question to that is, if we keep 100% of our folks on payroll through a certain date, is there potential for loan forgiveness?
Gotcha. Great question. So at this time, and again, only about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, there is no authority to SBA from Congress to offer any type of loan forgiveness. That being said, I have seen, and probably you have seen as well, potential offerings coming out in the new stimulus package where there is discussion of loan forgiveness and that sort of thing. And I believe you're correct. If I understand right, it may be tied to employees on payroll and that sort of thing. But for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, there is not a loan forgiveness situation. And I would again remind people that for this loan program, it is a loan. The loan is not funded by lenders. This loan is funded directly by SBA. And what that means is this is money from the Treasury. This is your money. This is taxpayer money from the taxpayer back to the taxpayer. So because of that, our ultimate responsibility is to the taxpayer. So I would encourage you, if you're an applicant and if you know that you're not going to have the capacity to repay, I wouldn't go through this program because the last place you want to be is in a situation where you're owing money to the U.S. Treasury. There might not be a worse place on the planet.
Yeah. So again, a lot of questions around what's coming with the stimulus package, but I do think this is an interesting question. So since this is not a grant, and this, like you just said, this is a loan that has to be repaid. If you are approved for it, and the stimulus package allows for, it would not be any loan forgiveness for this loan in particular, but does this become taxable income?
No, as far as I know, no federal loan program would be considered a revenue per se or taxable. Now, having said that, would that add into where you're looking at a company's assets or liabilities and determine company size and then changing tax brackets? In that particular situation, could it change what taxes are required of an entity? Well, certainly that could possibly play into it, yeah, but the loan itself is not a taxable income or recognized as a source of income.
And just so I'm clear on this, would you encourage folks, if they think they're a good fit and this makes sense for their business, to apply for this loan, but then to also look at what's coming out with the stimulus package and could apply for other different loans that are now available once the stimulus package is done? Is that correct, that you would encourage sort of both?
I would. If I'm a small business right now, I'm applying for this loan. I don't know that I'm eligible or that I'm going to get it, but what I do know is that if I apply for it and I am eligible, there's only one way to find that out, and that's through the application. Two, just because the loan's given to me doesn't mean I have to take it. I can always shelve it. I can always make the application. Then if I am eligible for a loan amount, that comes to me, but then I can make that decision. Hey, do I hold on to this, yes or no, kind of thing. So then conversely, while I'm doing that, I can apply for other programs via the federal, state, or local municipal levels, and that kind of thing. Right now, the Small Business Development Center network page, if you Google Colorado SBDC, they've got a pretty good list of COVID-19 resources that are available to businesses throughout the state. So you can go there. Definitely contact your chambers of commerce, contact your economic development folks, your county officials, and that kind of thing, and just sell your story. Hi, I'm company A. Here's what we do. Do you have anything to help us out during this time? And I would take advantage of whatever's available to me, so to speak. And the reason why is as business owners, I think we all understand putting our eggs, all of them in one basket, is never a good idea. And that applies to this scenario as well. So this is just one of many resources that are available to you. It's an excellent resource. It's a good resource. It's a very reasonable resource. Again, for the cost of the money, it's a really good deal, but it's just one thing of many.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a little bit more of a in the weeds question, but I want to be sure to get to all of them while we have time. So specifically about question number 13 on the application. And this individual bought a business that was started in 2015, but started a new LLC and purchased the trade name to continue the business in 2019. So they weren't sure if they should put 2019 or 2015 as the year.
If they bought the business and they were the owner, controller, basically the operations person, I would consider that a 2015 start.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So I think we're starting to get caught up on our questions. So if folks want to take a few minutes, and Steve, you can take a breath. You're doing a great job getting through all these. But if folks have other questions they want to put in, looks like, let's see, I'm just got another one. There was a question around, is this only for businesses, or where would you direct nonprofits to go for loans during this time?
Gotcha. Actually, thanks for asking that. So this is one of the very, very few programs that is eligible to some private nonprofit entities. And again, I'll say that private nonprofit entities. Now, it's going to be a matter of how your nonprofit is set up. Many nonprofits are set up as a sort of enterprise, meaning you routinely receive a revenue source, and you're able, and you even demonstrate perhaps the ability to repay debts as you incur them, no differently than a for-profit business. If that's you, but you're just registered as a nonprofit and you're private, absolutely you're eligible. Please apply if you think you need this resource. Having said that, if you're another kind of a nonprofit where you are a charity based organization, meaning you get pretty much 100% or close to it of all your income and resources are through donations. And then, of course, I would assume you turn around and donate those back out via some program or service de facto. In that case, you're probably not going to be eligible because you're not going to show the capacity or the ability to repay the loan. So I don't know if that's, is that clear? Let me know if I need to provide further clarification on that.
Okay. Another question about the credit scores. So this one is, can a co-founder who is not a 20% or more owner's credit score serve as a guarantor to meet the credit requirement if the largest owner does not meet the credit requirement? So it's a co-founder, but not the largest owner.
Gotcha. What you don't want to do is, so the person who is the main guarantor or main principal, majority owner, business management person, that person is going to want to be the one who makes the application. Part of that application is going to include a form, I believe it's 413D, which is the personal financial statement. Those would be gathered from all of the guarantors on the loan. So they're going to do a sort of co-credit or mixed credit kind of situation. And remembering the zeitgeist, if you will, of the loan program is to make sure that businesses stay open. So this is not a SBA trying to zap you and aha, we found one of your owners or guarantors doesn't have a whatever credit score, so we're going to decline. That's not the situation. The situation is we want to make sure that you A, have the capacity to repay, and B, that we don't provide a loan amount that's greater than that capacity, because the idea is that you reopen and are successful. We don't want you to reopen simply for the purpose of trying to pay off this onerous SBA EIDL loan. That's not the purpose. So yeah, so for purposes of credit score, I really wouldn't worry about that so much as I would worry more about the capacity or ability to repay the loan should you be granted one.
Great, thank you. Can loans be repaid early?
Absolutely. So the SBA has what is called a subsidy recoupment fee. In common parlance, you might hear the term prepayment penalty. So for disaster loans, there is no subsidy recoupment fee or there is no prepayment penalty. Clearly, if a business finds itself in a position to pay off the economic injury disaster loan early, that is encouraged, and there will be no penalty for doing so.
Great, thank you. So there is a question about what is considered an alternative source of credit. So that's kind of part A.
Gotcha. Okay. So what SBA is looking to do there, and again, we're wanting to make sure that we're making loans to folks who need the loans. So what that means is we don't want to make it to businesses that aren't small. We don't want to make it to business owners who are able to obtain credit elsewhere. And what that sometimes means is, let's say you're one of those businesses where you, the business owner, you own 40% of the business, and 59% of the rest of the business is owned by a various group of folks or whatever. So that leaves 1%. If that 1% owner if his name is Jimmy Buffett, would we call that credit elsewhere? Potentially we would. Now, what's more than likely what's going to happen is the Office of Disaster Assistance is going to look at the loan in totem, because probably the Buffetts aren't going to be running and controlling and managing your business day to day. They're probably going to look at the owner, manager, operators day to day, who's really putting in the money, who's really making the business work, and that sort of thing. Typically, that's what they're looking at. What they're really trying to prevent is someone who's got the potential to get credit elsewhere because they're attached to a larger company or entity, or they're part of a shell corp or an S corp here or there or whatever. We're just trying to make sure that we're putting the loan, the economic injury disaster loan program, where it needs to be.
Absolutely, that makes really good sense. And as you reminded us, this is taxpayer money, and as taxpayers, we all want to be sure that this funding is going to help small businesses that need it the most.
Right.
So a question about business interruption insurance. Does that disqualify?
No, not at all. So a lot of businesses have some sort of revenue interruption insurance, whatever name that goes by. And I'm thinking of hotel occupancy insurance. So if you're a catering business, you generally have insurance for when someone cancels out on you and so forth and so on. Now, historically, for a disaster loan, what SBA does is SBA pays the difference between the actual disaster loss and the insurance coverage. For example, let's say that the disaster, in order to overcome it, is $100,000. Insurance covers $50,000, so the SBA would come in and cover that other $50,000, the remaining $50,000. Having said that, in this COVID-19 situation, we haven't seen this before, and what we're assuming on the SBA side is we're assuming a couple of things. One, we bet no one has COVID-19 insurance. Secondly, we're betting that the people who did have business interruption insurance, that insurance is probably not up to the task of covering for this pandemic. So we would definitely want you to declare that. That would be a consideration on the loan amount kind of thing, but it would not in any way preclude you from getting the assistance to the program. It wouldn't be a basis for denial or anything like that. It would just be one of the many, many factors going into the program. Great,
thank you. Do all owners have to be guarantors of the loan, or can it just be the majority, like an owner who has 60%?
Right now, a great question. What we're looking for is for the majority ownership sort of situation. So we're looking basically for a disaster situation, you're looking for 20% ownership or more. Having said that, as your particular case-by-case application moves through the system, if you're not able to show or represent 100% ownership on the application, your loan officer may come back to you and ask you for financials and for a personal financial statement from whoever is missing from the process. It's not automatic, but they may. So just be prepared for that. If you're one of those where you literally have 100 or so people who have ownership in your business. Should you wait until you get all 100? No. Get what you would call a majority, get their information and submit it. And then if they ask for the remaining, they do, and you get it to them as soon as possible. I wouldn't want that to be a delay, trying to chase down people that the last time you saw them was when you were pitching your business 17 years ago.
Right. And this is kind of, you might have already answered this, but just to make sure we kind of have all scenarios covered, what about an employee-owned cooperative where each owner has an equal share?
Sure. Same thing. So what we're looking at there, we're looking at, again, we make sure affiliation worked out so that the business is small. And typically for a situation like that, from my experience, there's usually been a president or a keeper of trust, if you will, for the employee stock ownership situations. And generally speaking, it would be that entity that would make the application.
Great, that makes sense. So I think we have about maybe 7 more minutes, and I feel like, I've been doing a lot of talking. Steve has been doing a lot of talking. So if folks want to raise their hand, we can unmute you if your question didn't get answered, or you feel like you need additional information. You would just click on participants and do the little raised hand icon. Steve, this has been incredibly helpful. I feel like you've covered so much ground, and you can put this stuff on the website and see it in handouts, but really being able to talk through it is such a service. So thank you so much for giving us time. I think we might have time for like maybe a couple more if folks want to try to get those in. I don't see any hands getting raised, so that must mean the chat box is working. Let's see. So here's a situation in which the business was started in 2019, and the sole proprietor had workers' comp and then vocational rehabilitation went through their self-employment program. They did file taxes for 2019, but would that affect their qualifications, having gone through the workers' comp and the vocational rehab self-employment program?
So in and of itself, would that be a qualifying factor? No, it shouldn't be. What they're really looking for, again, is capacity. So I would say this: if you're that business that in October of 2019, you were struggling, you were trending down, sales weren't looking good, you were starting to lay folks off and that kind of thing, and your projections weren't carrying you past a quarter, if that's you, and it's unfortunate, this program isn't for that business. This loan program is for that business that you were doing fine. You were meeting projections within a couple of percentage points in October, same through Christmas, New Year's, February, you started feeling the sting, kind of thing, and then you realize, wow, okay, the COVID-19, our supplier was affected, or our customers were, or whomever. If that's you, this program is really meant for that type of business. So whatever other outlier conditions that were present at the time, in a sense, SBA would ignore those. What they're really looking for is continuing to keep the doors open to that business that basically would still be in business had this disaster not occurred.
That makes sense. Absolutely. Any last minute questions? We can maybe squeeze in one more before I'm going to turn it over to Deborah to wrap us up. Do want to say, Steve, we've gotten a couple requests that, again, once we have that federal stimulus package, we'd love to have you back. So hopefully Absolutely. This is kind of part 1 of a conversation, and we'll be able to have part 2. We had an extraordinary amount of interest in this, so we'd love to just be able to keep the dialogue open, and we're so very appreciative of everything you and your team is doing right now. We know it's a big lift, so thank you for everything.
Thank you. Appreciate what you guys do. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
All right, so now we're going to kick it over to Lindsay with Small Business Majority for just a quick wrap-up statement.
Hey y'all, I'm Lindsay Vigoda from Small Business Majority. I'm the Colorado Outreach Manager. And I just want to say thank you for joining. We are having a lot of webinars coming up. Look for either from Small Business Majority or Good Business Colorado. Look for the information for that webinar. It will be on Tuesday, and it's going to really talk about the federal stimulus package as well as some things happening in Colorado. And again, just thank you all so much for coming. It was great to have you on, and I hope this can be part one of many to come, because I'm sure there are a lot of questions happening. So thank you. And I'll hand it over to Deborah.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. And thank you so much, Karen and Jordan and Hunter and Lindsay, for organizing this. And Steve, you really knocked it out of the park. That was a lot of rapid fire questions. And thank you so much. I know our members really appreciate it, and the greater small business community. Just to put it out there, we at Good Business Colorado right now are 100% focused on helping our members weather this storm. So if there's anything that we can do to be supportive of you and your employees and your businesses, please let us know. As Jordan mentioned, we have a COVID-19 resource page on our website. It has information for our members and other small businesses that are having to make the really tough decision to lay off employees. There's a lot of resources we've consolidated to help you be able to help your employees weather the storm as well. And anything else we can do to support you and your employees and your business at this time, we are here to serve. So please let us know.
Awesome.
Great. Thanks so much, Deborah. Really appreciate it. Just want to let everybody know to be on the lookout for a follow-up email with some more additional information from SBA, as well as some follow-up questionnaire about your experience here on the webinar. So thank you everybody so much. We hope you're all well, and take care. We'll see you soon.
And I did see somebody asked if we recorded this, and we did record it, and we will be sending that out.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks again. Stay healthy, everybody. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Thanks
Goodbye.
again, Steve.